Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is I don't know who needs to hear this, but with my friend Ryan Schreiber. Ryan, please introduce yourself and your company, where you're calling from today.
Thanks for having me again, Joe, as always. And it's always fun to talk to you and chop it up. So I'm Ryan Schreiber. I'm with Metafora. We do technology consulting for the transportation, logistics, and supply chain industry. I work with shippers, transportation providers, freight tech companies, and private equity firms on initiatives that focus around technology and what to do with technology, and then how to get the most out of it is typically where we focus.
Excellent. So Ryan, I picked today's topic. I asked you if you would come on. On LinkedIn, you always post, I don't know who needs to hear this, but, and then it's always a hot take. I'll call it that. It's an opinion. And there's a lot of people who follow you, and I'm one of them. So I'm connected to you on LinkedIn. And sometimes there's rigorous debate about it. And sometimes it's just, oh, yeah, true. But I think you're obviously respected. You have a lot of followers and people are interested. And I got it sometimes when people go, oh, you're an influencer. You are an influencer. I don't mean that in a cheesy social media way. It is, you're an industry expert that people follow and they like your opinions.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I try not to take anything too seriously. And so I always just thought seeing posts that were like, I don't need to know who needs to hear this, was always just so self-serving that I decided to take it on myself. Again, just like in a manner of speaking, I actually just do it to poke fun at myself as well, right? Because I think they're very self-serving kind of intro posts. And so the folks who know me personally are in on the inside of that joke where I'm really just poking fun at it. But the takes themselves are based on what I see from working with companies across the space and things that I think that need to be surfaced. And the interesting thing about content creation is some of the stuff that I think will get the most reaction gets the least, and some of the things that I think will get nobody will care about, but me get a ton of reactions. But it's stuff that I see from working with the biggest companies in the space and the things that folks are struggling with today.
Yeah. And the advantage that you have and all consultants at Metafora have is you're talking to a whole bunch of different companies. And so you don't see a problem one place. You might see it 10 places. And then you've seen how they're dealing with that problem, not one place, but 10 places. And I think that's what makes your insights and insights from people like you just very valuable, because most of us are only living our own experience. And maybe we talk to a friend or we used to work at a company. That's the extent of it. You guys have a different view of the world.
Yeah, I started my career and people who have listened to your podcast know I started my career as an operator. I was an operator for over 10 years. And there's a lot of people who want to get into consulting. And I was talking actually to Nick Dangles, who's my business partner and some other stuff. We were talking about this 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of people who talk to me about wanting to get into consulting. And the reason they want to get into consulting is they want to share their expertise from their experience. And that's certainly not why I did it or do it. I do it because I'm really curious. And in my experience, the best consultants, industry focused or not, are the ones who are actually just really curious. Now, certainly my experience and the expertise I have from my career is really helpful, but it's helpful in creating a shorthand for understanding the businesses and understand. But curiosity is what actually helps me and helps our team help our customers, because we go in and we want to figure out what's going on. We can just do that super fast because we know the space, right? We can do that super fast because we've worked with a bunch of companies that look like you. But we lead with curiosity instead of leading with all the stuff that we know because we're experts. No, we lead with, we know the space. We're experts on technology. We know the space. We can really help you go really fast and answer these questions from seeing it other places, as opposed to just, I have this playbook from wherever I was for wherever.
And by the way, you and Nick and others, Mr. Leffler and Cassandra, all have law degrees. And I always think that you're not using it day to day, but that
Skill
being
set.
An advocate and taking a position and arguing for it, whether you necessarily agree with it or not, that's the nature of being a lawyer. So you might be defending someone. I always remember my guy at my country club was an attorney, and he said, oh yeah, I'm defending these guys. And they were in the newspaper. I go, oh my God, those guys are such dirtbags. How can you do that? He goes, actually, they're family man, just like you. And I go, not just like you and I, because I didn't kill anyone and I didn't torture anyone. But he goes, I know. He goes, but He goes, that's my job. He goes, it's how the legal system
I'm not
works.
sure if you just compared me to a murderer or not, but no, there's two things that I think serve us well. One is issue spotting. Like we have to be really good at identifying what the issues are quickly. We have to be really good at identifying, like in conversation, what people care about. And then the other thing is we have to be really good at advocating for a position, as you said, but while taking in information. If I don't believe in something, I won't fight for it. If you ask me my opinion, I'll give you my opinion on something, whether I care about it or not. But if I'm going to advocate for something, I have to be able to take in the information that you're sharing. I have to be able to listen really effectively, even though I'm talking, or even though I'm debating, or even though I'm advocating. I have to be listening to you. If I just beat you over the head with my argument over and over, I'm going to get nowhere. So I think those are two things that really serve folks who have that background. Not Nick, because he's the worst, but the other people that you mentioned. No, Nick is my best friend. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's part of it.
Oh, speaking of which, years and years ago, you said, oh, you should have Cassandra Gaines on your podcast. And I was like, oh, I reached out to her. And she said she's going to be on my podcast. And then we scheduled it. And I was like, oh, I must have upset her in some way. And then you go, no, Joe, it's not. Anyway, the reason I bring her up is it's back on the horizon. I should be finally interviewing your friend Cassandra.
Good. I'll text her and be like, don't bail on Joe. I'll do it right now while we're talking.
She is another one of those people to follow on. She's not, I don't see her daily on LinkedIn, but when she posts.
Yeah. She posts less frequently now, but yeah, I'm not sure why.
She's a busy woman, but she's got that same lawyer background. And again, I just see that as having maybe this the next level of logic and thinking that, that law school beats into you.
Yeah, it's just a toolkit that I think they learn. It's not anything else, but it's just a toolkit. And by the way, anyone can learn that. I think that's some of what we'll talk about, but like anybody can learn that.
I love what you're doing. And again, if you guys are not following Ryan on LinkedIn, please do. We wrote down a few things we wanted to talk about here. And these are all from the posts that Ryan always starts off with. I don't know who needs to hear this, but, and the first one is about pricing. Please elaborate, Ryan Schreiber.
So the post, I should have written down what the posts were that you wanted to talk about. It was, I don't know who needs to hear this, but pricing is a science, not an art form. That was what I had said. So that's one that gets a lot of reaction.
Oh yeah, I reacted to it when you said
you
it
did,
to me.
and your feedback was situated. So let me start with what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that your customers don't care about service or don't care about value. I'm not saying that pricing is always a commoditized race to the bottom. When I was a broker for most of my career, I would tell my customers, I'm not the cheapest, I'm just the best. And I say the same thing now, by the way, as a consultant. Hey, I'm not cheap to work with. Like, it is expensive to work with me and my team. But if you'd like to work with us, you're going to get differentiated results. And so that's the point. Call me when I was a Schreiber. Call me when you need value. When you need a cheap price, call somebody else, because that's not me, right? And so that created an environment where my customers actually valued what I brought to the table. Now, so what I'm saying in telling you that pricing is a science, not an art form, is that you can measure those things. You can measure the value that you provide. You can measure what your customers, what's called price sensitivity or price elasticity. How much do they care? Where do they care? When do they care? You can put that into a framework and measure it and distill that into buying behavior and buying patterns to get more of what you want, less of what you don't want, and come out ahead overall. One of my other posts one time was like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but when you learn that opportunity cost is a thing, the second part of your life begins, right? So you are spending dollars to chase dimes by rejecting the fact that there's specialized knowledge or institutional knowledge. Things about your customer, your job is to take those things and distill them into a framework so you can make better decisions, so that you can measure those results and you can get more of what you want and less of what you don't want predictably. That's the point.
And again, I know you agree with this. There's certain companies, and I've mentioned a few of them that I've interviewed, that Ruan Trucking, and I think Joyce Brenny from Brenny Trucking. They both said, we never are the cheapest price. We always tell people that we're the best at what we do. And what I heard from both of them said it. They buy from us because they have similar values. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting that both of them said similar values. So if I'm picking Ruan Trucking, I say, I know they win safety awards. I know they've been around for a long time. They keep their drivers around. Their trucks are new, maintained. And you go, that's just it. That's what I want. I don't want to mess around with bottom of the barrel, even if it saves me money.
And listen, there are times where every single one of your customers, even the ones who care about value, are going to only buy on price. There are customers who will only buy on price and don't care about the other service that you provide or the other differentiated value that you provide. That's okay. And that's going to happen. But I want them to choose me when they need value, and because that's where I come in. It is not inexpensive to work with me. And the truth is, this is what I think that in transportation, one of the things that makes it difficult to really wrap your hands around this. I talk a lot with our customers, especially our large customers, around cost per load or cost to serve and cost to operate, right? The issue is the P&L of a transportation provider, pretty simple. Like the cost of goods, what's tied up in cost of goods sold if you're a broker or a freight forwarder, it's your non-asset purchasing cost, right? It's how much I paid a truck or how much I had to pay a steamship line for this directly. All those other ancillary costs that are the service that you provide are all caught up below the line on your P&L. And so it is expensive to work with you. You are actually also expensive to work with. So you need to get paid for your time. You need additional margin to provide the level of service that you do provide. Something that shippers, I think, really don't understand a lot of times about working with intermediaries around that value is, oh, they're making a 15% gross margin or 20% gross margin or 10% gross margin. Most intermediaries are at a 95 or 97 operating ratio, meaning they're only, of all those dollars that they're generating up here, they're only taking 3 cents to the bottom line. All the rest of that is in servicing your business. All that other money is in servicing your business. And you've got to find that money somewhere if you're going to do it yourself or do it elsewhere. Or to companies that are able to cut price, they're doing it by not providing you predictably that service. And so you do get what you pay for. My only point here is you are doing yourself a disservice as a transportation provider by not putting the energy and effort into distilling that into a predictable framework that you can measure the results from, because your customers want to pay you more money. Let me rephrase this. The ones that want to pay you more money want to pay you more money. And they want you to be able to focus on the areas where you're actually providing value. And the area where you're not providing value is generating a price for them. Like the price is just the price. Then spend your time on problem solving, solutioning, et cetera, and building the relationship.
Yep. So how many companies out there, and I'm putting you on the spot here, Ryan, how many, then we're talking about, this is specific to freight brokerage, how many companies are using some of the pricing tools like the green screens, like DAT, some of those other solutions?
A lot of them are using DAT, which is not necessarily predictive. God, how many of them? I work with kind of mid-market companies and up. 90% of them are working with, the only ones who aren't are the the top of the top that have enough data to generate their own pricing, for sure. And then on the green screens front, 75%, 70%, something to that effect. And again, that's more, how am I going to buy? What's my buy price? And as an intermediary, right, with any type of intermediary, broker, freight forwarder, what have you, all you do is resell capacity. And so you have to know what your buy price is. I'm talking as well about sell price. And so all of the things that go into that, it's more than just, and it should be more than just, I talked about this earlier, cost per load. It should be more than just what I'm going to pay the truck or what you're willing to pay me. I used to say the best loads were the ones that I didn't win because I was going to lose money. And that doesn't just mean I quoted the customer $1,000 and the truck cost me $1,200. It actually also meant the loads where I quoted the customer $1,000, I paid the truck $850, but the customer required appointments on both ends. And I had to reschedule those appointments because they wouldn't match up. And I had to get a PO change because the required arrival date was before the first pickup date. All that back and forth. This customer would be one who would ask me for tracking updates, wouldn't take wouldn't they would make me call them once an hour with a tracking update. Things like that started to they were net 90-day payment terms. So I had float on the capital. All that chips away at your profit. And so that 850 isn't 850. That $150 of profit, of gross profit, isn't $150 of profit. And so that's some of the challenges that go along with pricing that should be a part of the science, not the art.
Yeah. And by the way, I've never liked it when somebody says, I'm going to send you a spreadsheet and just put your price in there.
Hard pass.
Yeah. That's one of the challenges I see doing that kind of business is, let's just say you send me that and you go, Joe, I need you to predict what's going to happen over the next 3, 6, or 12 months. And now I'm a little better at guessing what 3 months, 6 months, 12 months is going to be a little more difficult. But one of the things I don't like about that is somebody might say, Joe, you know what you should do is give Ryan something that's very low and then you bail on it and ask for a better price because you've been doing a good job. And I was like, I don't feel good about that.
I feel terrible about that. Yeah.
Or I give Ryan a fat price that no matter what I'm covering, I'll never say no to him. I will never say I can't do it. And then you give it now, because I don't know how you're going to judge it. So you might look and go, woohoo, Joe's really low. I gave him all these lanes, not knowing that I'm going to bail on you. Or I'm not working with Joe because he gave me these big fat prices. And this is, so when somebody sits down, they have a range in mind. And that's the stupid part of that business.
At some point we could do a whole podcast on what at Metafora we refer to as capacity strategy. There's actually a very good way to go about approaching exactly that problem, and it's around capacity strategy, and it's leading with your capacity and the liquidity in your network, because then it becomes a lot more predictable what is going to happen in 3 or 6 months. So there's a whole podcast we could do about that with my teammate Adam.
So we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any other links you give me. I'll put in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you about capacity strategy. So the next thing I want to talk to you about, and this is again another one of the I don't know who needs to hear this, but AI tools may hold you back. Now, you didn't say it exactly like that. That's me putting my own words.
Yeah. You are fairly likely to fail with AI agents. So anyone who knows me well, but for those folks who don't, knows that I'm a huge proponent of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and particularly ones that are predicated on natural language processing, which is what these GPT things are, generative AI is. Or sorry, the chat-related generative AI, phone, voice, what have you. My last company, so I've been working on these solutions for about 9 years at this point. In 2016, I started a company that was focused on natural language processing and chat. So I've been working on this for a very long time. The reason that people are likely to fail in what I'm seeing in this space is, and this is true of other technology as well, but it's taken a bit to an extreme with bots, is that it's actually really easy to do poorly. I was talking to Chad Olison. I don't know if you've ever had Chad on the
Yes,
podcast.
I've talked to him.
Yeah, so I was talking to Chad Olison, and I had dinner on Friday, and we were talking about exactly this concept that it's really easy to do poorly, but it's really hard to do to do right, to do well. And so the reason that you're likely to fail, from what I've seen in my experience in this, and again, from what we're seeing from larger companies, is thinking about it as a tool in a vacuum. Hey, I can just do this thing. It's like trying to go to play golf. If I buy a new driver, suddenly I'll be really good at golf. Suddenly, if I buy a new set of clubs, I'll be really good at golf and maybe I can go pro. And that's not the case. You need a strategy and a plan, and you need a way. You need to think about what the customer experience is going to be, what the vendor experience is going to be. There are a number where these things are going to fit. And then also, you really need to understand the technology and the underlying technology to suss out the vendors. There are vendors that are going, again, it's really easy to do poorly and really difficult to do well. There's a lot of reasons for that. And so not understanding the underlying technology and what it's going to take for those to be scalable successfully is a challenge. And so The reason that you're likely to fail is you don't do your homework and you just treat it as some tool that you can plug in somewhere and see what happens.
Yeah. A tool isn't a strategy. It's not necessarily fitting with your culture. So you've got to make sure it's fitting with all that stuff that says this is the way we want to treat our customers. And then somewhere along the line, somebody goes, hey, we bought this bot. Isn't it cool? And I started my career in automotive, and I told you the story before we hit the record button. When the U.S. automakers found themselves behind in lean, and they weren't as lean as the Japanese automakers, there was a lot of benchmarking done. And I remember what they learned from that 10, 15, 20 years later. And I remember I participated in a benchmarking thing with Toyota and Chrysler. And I remember Chrysler was saying, we were really quick to jump on all your tools. And because that's what you can grab on too easily. To your point, it's a lot easier to get a new driver than it is to get a new swing.
Right? But the reality is, like, if you're going to be better, you need the best equipment and you also need the best strategies.
Yeah. My dad used to always say this, but when I was a kid, I played hockey, and my generation always wanted new sticks. I'm sure the kids today did too. And my dad would always say, Gordie Howe could score with a broom. Right? And no doubt he could.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. And these tools are deceptively complicated. And again, that goes to my concept of it's easy to do poorly. They're deceptively complicated to make valuable beyond really basic workflows. I talk a lot in my posts about the concept of context and how that matters, how omni-channel communication matters. There's so much right now about AI voice agents, which are incredible. And I wish I had those 9 years ago. But context, omni-channel context matters. If I'm talking to somebody on the phone, if somebody calls me or I call somebody and they want help, they're going to be really frustrated if they sent an email 20 minutes ago that gave you some information about the problem that they have, and they have to start over at ground zero. A lot of times I tell folks that thinking about AI solutions, the easiest way I find to think about them is thinking about them the same way as humans, because there's a lot of parallels. When you call customer service for some problem that you have, and you've already called before, and they don't have notes they can pull up to educate themselves about what you've already said about this problem, you get really pissed off. Right. I just called 4 hours ago and explained this to somebody else, and I got to go through it again with you. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, especially I've had that where you tell them the problem, they go, I'm going to transfer you to Ryan.
I got to start all over from the beginning.
Your problem. You're like, I just told the other guy, what the hell?
And you're going to have the same, and we have the same problems with this type of technology. And the problem isn't the technology. The problem is the implementation of that technology.
Ryan it's not an exact fit for this, but Gary V, he always says, if anybody ever tells you this is a hack, this is how to hack yourself to 3,000 followers today, right? Or he says, that's a lie. And I think in some ways, when you say, hey, we'll just plug a bot in, you're not anti-AI. You're against the improper implementation of something that might not be a good fit for this context.
What I'm actually trying to fight against is when people fail at this, because they're going to, and they are, blaming the technology.
Yes. Yeah, I plugged it in where it didn't work.
You are the problem. More often, maybe one of the ones that we should have pulled is from a long time ago that I was like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but your issues with technology in your business are you, not the technology. And because
I love that
I see this all the time at every single business I go into. Every single time, they're the problem, not the tech. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have the right tech or the best tech, but even when it's that, even when they selected the wrong stuff, you picked the wrong thing because you didn't understand your business, because you didn't work the right process or what have you. So I'm incredibly pro these technologies. I don't want them to get a bad rap because their customers suck at understanding it. Now, the companies could do more to help their customers understand, but at the end of the day, they're there to sell their product. It's incumbent upon you to take ownership of your outcomes as a buyer of software and technology. And that's obviously where we help people as well, to be honest. But that's a big part of what I'm trying to fight against.
Yeah. By the way, I just talked to our friend Dawn Favier the other day about this, and I told her, I don't know how many times I've been through this experience when I was at a 3PL and then later on as I was advising shippers on selecting 3PLs, where somebody would say, we can create that report automatically from our system and send it to you. And I said, it doesn't work. And I would just quickly say that, and they go, no, you don't understand. And I said, no, I do. I've seen it out of 8, maybe 10 transportation management systems. It's not the fault of the transportation management system that it let us leave certain fields empty. It's not their fault that we put a freight forwarding shipment in there. And a lot of times, especially if you get a big, thousands of lanes of something, you go, oh, these 16 lanes cost $4. You're like, I don't think so. And it's because the humans.
It's because the humans. The biggest issue right now in machine learning and artificial intelligence getting better for these folks is the only way that these models improve is by knowing the outcome. So they have to know what happened to be better. So like a good example for pricing, because we were talking about pricing a minute ago, is a lot of times when you're pricing something on the spot market, if you're dealing with an SMB shipper particularly, you might not win a shipment because the shipment never went anywhere. Like it never became a shipment. They needed a quote to quote their customer. That is very different than I didn't win this shipment because my price was too high. And so again, it goes into this concept of the humans have to do their part to make this work. I need to know if I'm going to be using agentic AI, if I get an outcome I don't want, why did I get the outcome I didn't want? And we don't put that effort in often in these businesses because there's so much else going on that we don't measure that, and we have to discount that. So you're right, humans are a part of the problem. And if we don't input that information, we don't get that information, we don't ask the question.
So I always say the AI works on data and algorithms and computing power. We have all those things now, but the data, and Don said it the other day on my podcast, 35% of the data is dirty. That's why I was just called dirty data is our problem right now. So when somebody says, I want to plug in all this, we used to say garbage in, garbage out. I feel like we were using AI. It's garbage in, garbage squared, because we're making decisions about the future with this. And this is a whole nother podcast, but I'll throw this out there. We have a lot of flexibility within our transportation management systems. I don't have to fill in a field sometimes. I can leave it blank, or I can put stuff in there that might not make sense. And at some point, we're going to have to capture that. I think that's the difference between structured and unstructured data. We love email because it's completely unstructured. The problem with it is I can't do much with it in terms of data.
But you can. And so actually what I start talking to, a huge thing that I talk to our customers about right now is I do see that I love that people are focused on these agents. That's awesome. Folks are too focused on the generative applications of natural language processing. We can bring structure to natural language processing is about bringing structure to unstructured data in the form of conversational communications. And so what we should be focused on, and again, what we spend a lot of time talking to our customers about, and where we see our customers getting the most value is data capture, is listening to your phone calls, listening to your emails, and bringing that data in to your ecosystem for you to be able to action and decide on. So you have a clearer picture of what pieces of datum and what you need to be successful.
Right. Yeah. I guess what I'm getting at is I know AI can help us out to grab some of that data that is in an unstructured format and put it into a way that can start to be useful for us. And it reminds me, years ago, big shipper said it to me. He said, Joe, how much longer are we going to tolerate emails about these shipments? And I said, what are you getting at? He goes, I just feel like they should all be part of this record. And I was like, we can do that And some people are doing that. But what he was getting at is I quote Ryan a price, and then it has to go up for some reason. And then I send him an email. Hey, Ryan, instead of 1,900, it's going to be 2,300. And you say yes. And then later on, I update the TMS and somebody says, hey, what the hell happened here?
I used to talk about that a lot. That's the biggest reason that I was such a proponent of natural language processing in the first place, is that every process eventually breaks down. Every sort of like technology workflow at some point leads to somebody sending an email or making a phone call to ask a question. I used to have this customer who every morning he would call me, and you've probably heard me tell this story before, but every morning he would call me and say, are we good on our shipments for today? And I'd say, yeah, Willie, we're good. So then I started automating a report out of the TMS. Hey, are we good on our shipments today? He'd still call me. So then I gave him a login to the TMS. Hey man, you can see all this information. It's great. Still wouldn't do it. Still called me every morning. So then I started automating an email that went out and said, hey, we're good on our loads today. And he stopped calling because there was something implicit in that channel for him that he needed or wanted, and he wanted it from me. And there's absolutely, at some point, somebody makes a phone call and says, hey, it says in the system that this is the case. Can you confirm this for me? Hey, I need to know what's going on here. Or to your point, I want to negotiate this rate. So I think there's a lot in there. We probably got time for one more if you want to pick one more.
Yeah. I'm going to lose you in 13 minutes. So you said something to me before we hit the record button, and I think this was part of one of your, I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you've been struggling with your business over the last couple of years, it's not the economy's fault. It's your fault.
Yeah.
You are an abusive consultant. I want somebody who says nice things to me.
Yeah. I'm not the cheapest. I'm just the best. I also tell people a lot of times, if you want to hire somebody who tells you what you want to hear, you should hire someone else because we're going to tell you what you need to hear.
That's what I want. Just come on, just one day a week, come in and tell me everything.
And you should definitely hire somebody who's not us for sure. Listen, there are, as you were saying in the lead in, one of the cool things about being a consultant is that I get to see companies. I get to see a bunch of companies, and I get to see them all the time. And when our team is in there working on things. And so we know the truth of the matter. We don't just know the stories that people tell us. We know what's actually going on. And we work with big companies and we work with mid-market companies. And we certainly have relationships with smaller companies. And we can see across the spectrum what's going on, what's happening. There are companies that are doing well and there are companies that are not doing well. Now, that's not to say that there are companies that are doing as well, quote unquote, depending on how you define that, as they were in 2021. They're not. There are trade-offs, but they're doing as well on the metrics that matter, like profitability or like net operating income, because and the delta really is the business itself, the company, the leaders of the company, and if they're struggling and why they're struggling comes down to a couple of different things. They're reactive. I will never understand how or why in this industry that is constantly cyclical, right? There are market cycles. I've been in the industry almost 20 years, seen plenty of them. You've been around longer than that, seen plenty of them. Rates go up, rates go down, variable. That's what happens, deregulation, et cetera, right? Everybody's always surprised that it happens again.
Who knew? Who knew the rates were going to go down again?
How is this the case? Not everyone, actually, just the companies that struggle. The companies that struggle are always surprised. Oh my God, the sky is falling. Everything was so great. We were making so much money. How could the market possibly dip? And then when the market's bad, it's, oh my God, we're going to be this way forever. When's it going to turn around? I need someone to tell me. The issue is, like, hope is not a strategy. And instead of planning your business effectively around the knowable future, the knowable current state, and the things that will be coming down the pipe, you're reactive, you hope that something won't change or that something will change. There are tactics and strategies that are working right now for folks that don't require laying off half your staff or whatever it might be to get profitable, or to maintain profitability, or to maintain solvency. Excuse me. There are absolutely folks who are growing revenue, growing load count, growing gross profit. Their gross profit per load might be down, but they're offering something to their customers that matters, that gives them value. and that they're hiring effectively to do that. They're training effectively to do that. And they're not reactive. They have developed the business strategies to get there. So really the delta is the companies that are struggling are the ones that failed to plan.
Yep. A year ago, I talked to Ann Renke, who is still at TIA now. She's at IANA. And we're talking about the market was slower a year ago than it was at the peak during COVID. And she said, we do a poll every year because I think, I'm not positive of this, I think people pay based on their size of their company. And so she said two-thirds of our members grew. And she said, so now TIA, I'm assuming it's going to be a little higher end. It's not going to, but it probably has a decent cross section of the freight brokerage market. And so those two-thirds grew. I don't know what the other one-third were doing, but I'm pretty sure sometimes maybe there's some people are there saying it's the market. And meanwhile, their competition is growing. And I think we've all seen those articles that some of the very best companies grew out of a recession or depression.
That's right. And what they did was they architected their business to be more resilient. So a lot of folks in the brokerage space, ever since I've been in it, ask about margin compression. Is margin compression coming? And my answer is you're asking the wrong question. First of all, margin compression always does come. You see it in a deflationary rate environment. Margins become compressed, right? Because it's a speed of information game. But the other thing is you're asking the wrong question. The question should be, how do I make my business better to operate in a low margin environment? Because you're going to have one of two possible futures. One of my favorite things to do is, hey, there are only one of two possible futures, because it's true. In so many scenarios, there's one of two possible futures. So low margin future, one of two possible futures. Margin compression comes, margin compression doesn't come. Those are the only possible outcomes, right? If you decide to focus on how to deal with margin compression, it doesn't matter which one of those two futures come. If you deal with it and it does come, great, you've survived. But if it doesn't come and you've also dealt with it, your business is better for it. You have more price elasticity. You can do all kinds of different things, what have you. And if you don't plan for it, then one of two possible futures. You were lucky, it didn't come and you stayed alive, but somebody worked on it and they now have a competitive advantage to you. And over time, they're going to chip away at your lead, or they're going to continue to chip away at your business. So you're asking the wrong questions. It's the same thing with, hey, my business sucks and the market sucks and it's got to be the market. No, it's not. The market is always going to turn. The market is always going to. So asking me, when do I think the market is going to turn and do I think the market has turned, is asking the wrong question. The question is, what do I need to do right now? And then what do I need to do to prepare for when the market does turn to capitalize on it?
Yep. And I think there's also always the opportunity that you change your business around a little bit. And I was at Manifest. I talked to you. I did not interview you. We never got together for that. But one of the things I was saying at Manifest, and I'd love your 2 cents on this. 15 years ago, somebody might have said, hey, I like Ryan because he can get me a truck. I like that freight broker because they get me a truck. Then at some point it became, I like those guys because they got me a truck. And they also have a technology that I like. It's streamlining the process. And then when that became the norm, then it became, they give me good analytics. They give me stuff that helps me understand more about the business. And now I'll say, from those analytics, we're providing insights and advice, and we're being much more consultative. So I got to think there's some companies that are not offering all of that, while others are offering maybe even more. So please speak to that.
I don't think that this is unique to our industry, but it's the only industry that I really work in and know. So I'm going to have to tie it to our industry. So many companies in our industry, they focus on what I like to call us problems. When I would talk to, instead of focusing on their customers' problems, they focus on their problems that their customers should care about. Their customers care about their own problems. Your problems are your problems. So, now that's not to say that their customers don't want to make their businesses better. when you can articulate to them why and how the things about you problems become their problems, a great example of this would be detention or demurrage, right? Hey, when you detain these boxes, it costs a lot of money and that's a problem. And then how is that actually, as a shipper, it's great. I paid attention. So like what, who cares? There are actually downstream consequences to them, right? Inbound rates are more expensive or outbound rates are more expensive or whatever. There are claims issues or whatnot. But then you've got to take that a step further. Why do their customers care about that? How is that impacting their customers? And so really understanding your customer's business and understanding the things that generate your customers about. There's a big grocery warehouse in the Northeast that is notorious for fake claims, quote unquote fake claims, and detention and demurrage and all of those negative things. And like when you talk to one of your customers about it, too bad, they're too big of a buyer. There's nothing I can do about it. But there are things that you can do about it, Mr. Customer. If I can understand how to optimize, are there certain times if I can get into the analytics like you're talking about in the insights, can I optimize for certain types of times of day? So Mr. Customer or Miss Customer, if you adjusted your outbound shipping schedule from your facilities by an hour, maybe I can hit this window where I'm less likely to hit detention, which is then going to cost you less money. Maybe they can, maybe they can't do that because labor management is an issue in their businesses. But those are the kind of insights that it's not helpful to tell them that they have detention. It's helpful to tell them how it impacts their business and things they can do about it. And you're absolutely right. There are companies that are going deep on that, and there's companies that aren't. And this is something I always find hilarious. You can't tell me that it's a relationship business and also then tell me in the same breath that your customer doesn't care about that type of stuff. Like it can't be both of those things at once. Either it's a relationship business and your customer wants to have a relationship with you and wants to work together to understand their business better and your business, or they don't and it's not a relationship business. But anyway, that's some of the stuff that certainly we're seeing across the board.
Yep. So I'm going to lose you in a few minutes here, so I'm going to wrap this bad boy up. So I'm talking to my friend Ryan Schreiber, and again, he's a great follow on LinkedIn, and he always starts...
A lot of hot takes.
So he's probably got... There's going to be 100 of these, but he always begins, I don't know who needs to hear this, but that's... So we talked about a few things. We talked about pricing. We talked about AI tools. We talked about struggling over the last few years like so many companies have. Put a big old bow on this one and tell us one more time, who does Metafora work with?
Yeah, so Metafora works with shippers, transportation providers, freight technology companies, and private equity firms on initiatives that typically center around technology. We only work in this space. So it's, hey, what tech do you have? What tech should you have? How should you be using it? Where are you not getting the value? And then we help them implement those strategies. We help them get rid of things that weren't working, make the use of the things that they have already that should be working and bring them things that will work for them.
Yep. And since you do work with so many people in this space, you do have a real interesting take on it. So no one has to get up to speed on the business. They come from this business.
Yeah, that's right. That's definitely. That's
so
right.
What conferences will we see you and the fine folks from Metafora at?
I'll be at the TIA conference here in a couple weeks in April. And then I won't be, but like some of the financial conferences like Jefferies and Harris Williams, some of our team will be at. And then later this year, we'll be at things like F3 and some things like that.
Usually if you go to any of these conferences, you see the fine folks from Metafora there. Ryan, I know you got to go. Thank you so much for taking the time. I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, and any of the links you and your go-to-market team give me, I'll put in the show notes. And as usual, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's always fun, Joe.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. And I know I always say that, but I do mean it. And until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.